Hello, career thought leaders. We're happy to see you here today. And we are going to be talking about the second three trends for our Career Jam, which is our annual event where we get together and look at the trends that are coming up for the next year. So last week we shared our top three trends: emerging tech and jobs, our talk about remote work, and virtual job search. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more about the next three trends, which are our diversity, equity, and inclusion, mental health and managing our anxiety, and then older workers and career strategies for them. So I look forward to hearing from you. And if you're joining us here, feel free to say hello in the chat. And we'd look forward to hearing what you're seeing in these trends, or if you've been able to attend one of the first three events, what some of your favorite takeaways were. And we just had a fabulous day today already. We heard from Chris Moreland about diversity, equity, inclusion, and he was amazing. We'll talk about that here in a little second. And then Deborah Benton shared about remote work and being effective as we do work remotely. And just that thought as she shared about how everything that we do well as leaders and as workers, we have to do it double time when we're doing it virtually, because it takes that much more effort for us to really make sure that we're communicating well, that we're connecting with people, and that we're able to do that virtually just like we would in person. So I'm excited to have heard from them, and we have so many more sessions coming up. We've done 3 down, 6 to go, so lots more information coming, and I look forward to that. So if you're joining us here again, feel free to say hello. Looks like we have some of you joining us here today, so thank you for that. We're excited to see you. And Kalisha, yeah, great. And also Robbie, nice to see you. And Deb, so great to see you too. And Deb, thank you for participating in our sessions this far. It's been really fun. So let's look at our trends here. And today, again, we're going to be talking about these next three. So diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of human reasons very important for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there's also a lot of business data, business case data out there on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what happens when we have more diverse leadership for organizations. And of course, that means diversity in a lot of different ways. Some of the ways that we can measure it are shown, here, where we're looking at the diversity for gender, ethnicity, etc. So when we look at organizations that have more diverse leadership teams, they typically do better in terms of their financial output. And there was a big Goldman Sachs article a year or so ago about how boards, organizations that have women on their boards were doing so much better financially. McKinsey has a lot of data about what's going on, even in the pandemic, about how organizations with diverse leadership teams have been more successful. So if we aren't cluing in on the personal reasons to do it, here we've got some financial reasons to do it. And there's always diversity of thought in our leadership of our organizations. So it's good to have both types of stories so that we can share this information and help them see the case for diversity, if you will. So some great data here on why this is important. And the definition that Chris shared this morning for diversity was really simple. Just that diversity is allowing and creating space where each person can do their best work. And don't we all want that? Don't we all want a place where everyone can do their best work? Of course, we think we get there differently, and we have different ideas about how we get there. And when we look at this body of work, it's really thinking about, yes, we all want this for our teams, for ourselves, for each other, that we create a place where we can all show up and do our best work. And that's not easy, right? That's a complex thing to do, which is why we spend a lot of time, and organizations spend a lot of time trying to figure this out. And they are financially rewarded when they do that based on this data. So the next piece here, and this is a little bit deeper into the data from McKinsey, really talking about how when leaders are seen as inclusive and organizations are seen as inclusive, everyone is happier at the organization. So it doesn't matter how they identify and whether they would identify with a underrepresented group or not, everyone likes an organization where they feel like the organization is inclusive, because we all have something about ourselves that we feel like is unique and different, and maybe sometimes rubs against a culture. So when a culture really does a good job of trying to be inclusive, it makes all of us feel more welcome, which isn't, that isn't too surprising. And this kind of comes back to that idea of belonging. And if we're creating places where people feel like they belong, then everyone is happier and everyone does better work, back to the financial performance. And this morning, Chris was talking about that as well, that definition of inclusion really being that I consider your diversity before I consider mine, right? I'm kind of curious about your diversity and how it's going to work with the situation, and not just focused on myself. So if you haven't listened to that session yet, you've already listened or you've already joined Career Jam, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to it. It's very poignant and powerful and effective. He kept everyone's attention for the whole 90 minutes, and we had an interactive discussion, but it was really well done. So we're actually still working on that recording. We'll get it up as soon as possible so that you can go back and listen to it. But organizations are starting to see this. They had started to see it. This was one of our Career Jam topics last year. And then, of course, this year, people have been even more attuned with the fact that diversity matters within organizations and systems. And we're really working at being better, at being inclusive, and thinking about diversity in all of the ways. So we've talked about neurodiversity and people that might be on the autism spectrum, obviously looking at some of the data around disabilities and employment. And when we think about unemployment, and that some of those categories of folks have even more challenges in today's world, especially in unemployment. So I know that a lot of you out there are helping those folks, and hopefully you'll share some resources, more resources, and you can go back and look at our white paper from last year. There's a wealth of resources there for helping individuals and from all across the spectrum of reasons that we might be struggling more than everyone else in today's market. So that piece on diversity, we've got the personal case, the human case, and then the business case, and having stories to tell and being able to share those with our clients, our leaders, to help them be better leaders of these spaces. Because if they are not embracing these topics, they're going to struggle in being effective as a leader in today's market, in today's world. Understanding these topics, understanding how they lead with these, and if they're job searching, understanding how they communicate their commitment, their work with diversity, equity, inclusion will be important while they're job searching today, because a lot of organizations are going to be asking leadership candidates about those topics. Anything else that you're seeing in this space, feel free to share. I'd love to hear what you're seeing. So our next one, mental health and anxiety management. We're all living this, and we know this, and we're trying to help our clients with this. I'm really excited. Jordan Friedman's going to come on tomorrow, middle of the day, and talk about strategies that we and our clients can use to manage our anxiety, manage our stress. He's the stress coach, so this is what he does, and this is he's going to share some of those strategies for us. I found some data just to help us maybe normalize this for ourselves, for our clients, thinking that we're all under stress more than usual, more than positive psychology was our topic last year. And some of this data was there, and then it's just been growing. And of course, those of us that live alone or who are, women here is higher because of course they're dealing with homeschooling, taking the brunt of most of that. And then some of the other groups that are struggling with higher anxiety. And if we're working with clients in those sectors, especially, how are we helping them manage their anxiety and manage their stress? And sometimes, and a lot of us have been talking about simply having a conversation, opening the door, making sure that we're spending some of that time talking about who they are and how they are before we jump into our services, which as coaches and counselors, it comes quite naturally to us. We might have to think about it a little bit more now that we're virtual. This was one of the insights that one of our attendees at Career Jam shared this morning, just thinking about that small talk that we used to have with people when we're in person, and maybe they're just first sitting down in our office and taking off their coat or whatever, that we've got to create some space for that now that we're doing our work virtually, and be a little more thoughtful about those questions that we ask so that they feel welcome sharing and connecting. How are they as a person? How's their family? And how are we allowing that conversation to happen so that no matter what they might be experiencing right now, they feel like they can share a little bit of it with us. And then how are we taking care of ourselves? Because of course, as we're taking on some of that every time we talk to a client, what does our support system look like to make sure that we're doing that self-care for ourselves? And it's so excellent to see so many of you in person, or if you're here on the chat, because we can create that support system for each other. And I know a lot of you have colleagues all across the world that you reach out to and you connect with, as well as, of course, your own local or family support system, and how important that is for all of us right now, to recognize for ourselves as well as for our clients. And one of my board members was saying it the other day, that old cliche of put on your own mask before you help someone else. And right now it can be easy for us to forget about that when there's so many people that need help, and maybe we need to take on business because we've got our own livelihoods to manage. And how do we balance all of that with our own mental health and physical health so that we can stay well, especially through this winter season here in the northern hemisphere, and you all in the southern hemisphere, of course, see different challenges in staying healthy during this time. So that's one of our other topics. And how do we help manage that anxiety? We know it's there. We don't need a lot of data. We feel it every day. One of the other articles that I read is actually another McKinsey article, was talking about grief and how we're all dealing at some level with grief right now. Anticipatory grief, maybe grief because we've lost someone recently or know someone deep, closely who's lost someone. And how are we helping our clients and ourselves process that grief? But then also, how are leaders leading differently, knowing that all of that is going on? And sometimes we don't think about it as grief, but even with the 20% of women who've left the workforce to take care of their kids. Deborah Ben, one of our speakers, was talking about that today, that her niece had left her job to help homeschool the kids right now, and that she was enjoying it. And that may be true of us, of our friends, of our family, and yet there's still some grief there around kind of having to do it, right? It's a forced change. And how are we processing that? Got members in my own family who've had to step back their careers because their kids are at home homeschooling. And how do we help our clients manage that? And then, of course, they're going to have to figure out how to get back in the workforce when all of this is over, if they choose to do that. And we'll be there to help with that as well. So Robbie, let me see here, 65% least anxiety in pandemic than other groups. Yeah. And then more than those who live alone. Lots of different categories, of which some people will probably fall into both of these categories. And what does that mean for them, and how we can interact with them and help them. And of course, if they've lost their job, which isn't shown on this, my guess is that would be even further, because we know the mental health impacts of that. And this positive psychology landscape, and again, the white paper from last year, we had a lot of those positive psychology resources. How can we bring those into our work? We did a free session in January on positive psychology. I'll find the link to that and drop it here for you. And timely, didn't even know, right, in January, talking about how we could use some of that positive psychology in our work. Jordan's got a little bit different approach, so I'm excited to see what things that he's going to share as well, and that we can bring into our work. During this time, I had the fortune to be invited by Susan Britton into a group that was started by Charmaine I'm not going to say his name right. He wrote Positive Intelligence. And that has been really positive for me during this time, to use some of his work. He's got a book, and then the program that we were involved in had audios, and changing your thinking about how you're managing your own energy and mindset. Deborah Benton this morning shared that productive, constructive mindset. and our discipline in choosing that productive, constructive mindset as we're experiencing chaos, as we're experiencing crisis. It is a choice. Doesn't mean that we're not experiencing crisis and chaos, and yet we can find that way to choose that mindset. So how do we help our clients do that, and how do we reset and help ourselves do that every day, because we're of course experiencing all of this alongside them. So then our last one here is this older workers and career guidance, and our just thinking here about the baby boomers and what they've experienced. I shared an article a couple of weeks ago that your average C-level person is now 56. So they're actually moving into that Generation X. And what does that mean as our older workers kind of transition generations? We've been talking about baby boomers for a long time, and of course they're still in that older worker category, but now your Generation X is starting to fit into that, however people are defining it. They're going to fit into that older worker category, and they're going to experience it a little different, right? They're going to do it differently. They're going to bring different challenges and mindsets to that older worker phase. And I'm really excited to talk to Laura, because even just in the information that she's already sent me, Laura Walker from the UK is our speaker on this topic, and she's been doing a lot of research and really challenging our assumptions around how we help clients move through this phase, looking at it developmentally, and that idea of, taking risks. What does that really look like when someone's in that phase of life? And how do we help them balance confidence and fear? And she just has a lot of interesting ideas that I'm excited to learn about. And you can look her up. I'll find the link to her book and drop it here in the chat as well. Laura Walker from the UK. She just had, I think it's Dancing with Fear and Confidence is the name of her book. And looking at that older worker phase and how do we help them a little bit differently than our other clients based on developmentally where they are in their work life. And now we're going to see more bias coming back. Some bias in general for all groups was starting to go down and in the hiring process. And now we're going to see that ramping back up, although hopefully it will be somewhat short-lived if things can get back on track here after COVID. And how are our older worker clients going to manage that? How are they managing the pressures of going back to the workplace and their health? Because we know that a lot of them are most at risk right now. So really thinking about how that audience is needing help and what they're needing from us, and also how they're shifting as that Generation X moves into that kind of category of older worker. So that's the topics that we've been talking about. Those are our 6 topics. You're going to continue to see more of that here on our live. We'll bring in some guests and talk about some of these topics in a little bit more depth, and of course be sharing some of the other learnings and output from the Career Jam event that we're having this week. You can still join if you want to go to careerthoughtleaders.com/Career Jam. You've missed 3 sessions, so you can check the recordings out for those ones, but we've still got 6 sessions coming up. And that opportunity to hear and listen and learn from some speakers, as well as connect with other colleagues during our discussion groups. So thank you to those of you who've been participating. It's been a lot of fun to hear what you're talking about and see what you're seeing in the work that you do all across the globe. And we will be sharing more of those insights here with you on our live sessions on Tuesday. So we'll see you right back here again next Tuesday.